Recently, I over-tightened one of these nozzles on the Ender 3 that I have. To fix it, I needed to buy a new block. The threads on this block were just broken along with the nozzle. Here you can see that there's some metal in these threads. This is after a full year of using the 3D printer and constantly changing nozzles. For the nozzle I've been using themselves, you can see that there's no way for it to make a seal. This was one of the reasons why it would keep leaking through the nozzles. And in comparison to the newer ones, you can see that they're clean all around and just have a little bit of plastic inside the nozzle itself. The failure is my fault since I would over tighten most of the time in order to keep it from leaking out through the nozzle, when I should have opened everything up and cleaned everything out, since at that time there was obvious plastic already leaking out through the top of here. In order to avoid the problem, heat up the extruder end and pull out the filament. Before taking off the current nozzle, I recommend cooling down the extruder end. Once everything's cooled off, take off the housing, unscrew the nozzle. This wrench right here is a 4-inch wrench, tying up the nozzle so that's snug. Finally, we can put back the housing and push the filament back into the hot end. I recommend heating up the extruder when taking everything apart and being very careful since everything will be hot. So the block replacements that I got also came with the guide for the filament to go through. The replacements also come with their own silicone housing. It didn't come with the bolt that holds down the heating module or any other bolts. You want to be careful and keep the bolt safe and try not to lose it. When assembling, the guide goes completely through all the threads. What I'm going to do is just put in the nozzle. I'm going to try and use some tape sealant. I used this on my truck engine before. It seems to be holding up fine. It's rated for 260 degrees Celsius before it starts becoming unstable. So it should be fine for the 3D printer. I'm going to apply it in order to keep filament from coming outside of the threads, making it easier for the future. I'm not going to apply any tape to the nozzles since I'm probably going to be taking them off frequently. And since it just needs a really good contact up against the guide itself, I'm going to leave a gap in between the nozzle and the block just to make sure that it's firmly pressed against the guide instead of firmly against the block itself. If the tape doesn't hold up, then I'll make another video, and if it does hold up, I'll probably do an inspection in about 3 months. So now it's pretty easy. You just put this on all the way down. It butts up and tying it down. Making sure it's locked in place. It will still be able to move around. You put the nozzle in now, you can just tighten it up and it won't move so easily. Now I'm screwing in the lock for the Teflon guide. Make sure that the screw is opposite from the nozzle. So here I need to turn it around in order to line up with the holes on the bottom. Now go in the screws. These are the flush ones. Make sure they're completely tight on the block. At this point you can make sure that the nozzle itself is tightened. You don't have to tighten it too much, just make sure there's a good contact between the nozzle and the guide. Next up, put in the retaining screw for the heating module. Make sure that it's not popping all the way through. Alright, so now time to put it on the 3D printer. You're going to get the screws with the washers, put them in through the hot end, and screw them into place. Align it so that it's not crooked. Now I'm inserting the Teflon tube all the way through until it butts up against the nozzle and clipping it in. Now I'm putting back the heating module, tying down the heating module, putting the thermal resistor inside the hole. With a Phillips screwdriver, I'm going to secure the thermal resistor. Finally, I'm putting the fans back on. Now that everything's tight and you've gone over it twice, you want to turn on the printer and set it to home. You'll have to redo the leveling since you moved the extruder. When leveling, just use a piece of paper and raise it or lower it until it grabs the paper. Alright, so after a bit of printing, here's the first one. And this is using a 1mm nozzle. And here's another print using the same nozzle and same settings, except that the file is optimized for printing with 1mm. There's no noticeable difference to me when using the tape. That's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. And thank you for watching.